Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we have a grammar lesson on adverbs and adjectives in which we'll be discussing all the possible forms and functions and many other questions that are frequently asked with regard to the adverbs of modification. So let's start by asking ourselves a very basic questions on adverbs. What do adverbs modify? That's the first question. Well, we do know that adverbs describe several things, right? Such as verbs and adjectives and other adverbs as well. Adverbs can also describe whole or part of a sentence. We call these sentences clauses, right? Let's take a look at them individually now. So loudly is a type of adverb. Sings would be the verb. Tall is an adjective, and very would be the adverb describing the adjective. So Philip is very tall. Another adverb, to is an adverb of modification, which describes quickly, which is also a different type of classification of adverb. And because these two adverbs are from different classifications, then they can sit back to back, okay, in the same sentence. Fortunately is another adverb that describes a whole clause, and this type of classification of adverb can be used either at the beginning, in the middle, and sometimes even towards the end of a sentence or clause. Not in all cases, but there are special types of classification for that. Now, it's true that adverbs often end in the suffix ly, but some adverbs, including words such as fast, for instance, look exactly the same as their adjectives. So it can be sometimes confusing to tell what is what. Is it the adverb that I need? Is it the adjective that I need? And what's the difference, right? So there's different types of adverbs, and sometimes adverbs look like adjectives. So that's another thing. Let's go on to talking about these two and the variations in structure. We know that adverbs modify verbs. That's one thing they do. But what does this mean? This means that adverbs actually describe the way an action is happening. They describe how that action is happening. So I'm going to give you a few seconds now to think about the following question. Look at the three sentences below. Which are the adverbs in these sentences? You have a few seconds to determine which they are. Once you've done that, let's see how well you did. Which were the adverbs? Loudly is an adverb, impatiently is an adverb, seriously is an adverb. So if you got these answers right, you're well on your way to understanding much better the difference between adverbs and adjectives. And remember that adverbs answer the question how, okay? How means in what way or in what manner. So you might say, how does Philip sing? Loudly. He sings loudly. How does my cat wait for me when I come home from work? Impatiently. She waits impatiently. How will I consider your suggestion? Seriously. You can say, I will seriously consider your suggestion, or I will consider your suggestion seriously. With this type of adverb, both variations are possible because of the structure. Now, remember that adverbs can answer other types of questions, giving more detail or information about the performance of the action in terms of location and even direction. So when you're talking about direction and place, right, answering a question where, you could say, for instance, turn here, turn there, stop there, move backwards, inch forwards. I mean, these are actually considered prepositions by many, but what they are really adverbs. And another type of adverb that can be used is early, right? We don't say we arrived early. The correct way to say it is we arrived early. So early is the adjective as well as the adverb. In that case, it doesn't change, right? And what's the opposite? We arrived late. But we don't say we arrived lately, because lately is a different type of adverb that is in a classification of its own and would mean something completely different in context. Right, so now there is one type of verb you need to be careful of, because this type of verb we're going to be talking about doesn't mix well with adverbs. And that kind of verb is called a linking verb. And I'll give you a few examples of linking verbs. Verbs such as feel, smell, sound, seem, and appear. Okay, they usually need adjectives. They don't need adverbs, so they are very different to other verbs, as we will see. A very common example of this, right, of this error is the sentence below. Can you determine which the mistake is, which correct word is in this sentence? Okay, so we don't say I feel badly about what happened. So badly is actually the wrong word to use in this sense, in this case. Let's discuss why. Feel is a verb, so because it's a verb, it usually seems like it might need an adverb rather than an adjective, but be careful, because feel is not any verb. It's a linking verb, as discussed earlier. So an adverb would describe how you perform the action of feeling. However, on the other hand, an adjective describes what you feel. So it describes what you feel. That's an important word right there. So if you said, I felt badly, it would mean something else. It would imply that you are not very good at feeling things. It would imply that you might be insensitive, for instance, in the sense of the tactile sense. So if, for instance, take this example, if you're trying to read Braille, right, wearing thick leather gloves, how well are you going to feel the bits under you? Not very well, probably. So then in that case, it might make sense for you to say, I feel badly. But if you're trying to say that you're experiencing negative feelings and negative emotions, then don't use the adverb, use the adjective. So I feel bad is correct in this case. I feel bad about what happened is right. So I feel bad, the weather is bad. Okay, so different classifications. Now let's go on to a different classification of adverb. These are the modifying adverbs, or adverbs of modification, as are written in many grammar books. Adverbs can modify adjectives and other adverbs, as we talked about earlier. The reason for this is often because the adverb is to add a degree, the reason of the adverb that we use it is to add a degree of intensity, okay? A degree of heat, perhaps, to the adjective we are trying to describe. For instance, the woman is quite pretty. You could say the woman is pretty, but if you want to know how pretty she is, to what extent she is pretty, then you need to use an extra adverb. That adverb would be modification adverb. This book is more interesting than the last one, which implies there are two books you have read and are trying to contrast. So one of them, in comparison, is more interesting. So more is the modifying adverb. The weather report is almost always right. And this is where lots of students ask me, but Lisa, is it okay? Is it natural? Is it correct to say almost always? The answer is yes, because both of these words are adverbs, albeit different types of adverbs. So always is an adverb of frequency, whereas almost is an adverb of modification. So yes, because they belong to two distinct category of words, then yes, they can fit side by side together in the same sentence. So the adverb almost is modifying always. That's what's happening. Philip asked, "Is my singing too loud?" Loud being the adjective, too being the modifying adverb. My cat is incredibly happy to have his dinner. So incredibly here is the adverb, okay, of modification, which is describing the adjective and elevating it. Okay, that's what a modification adverb does. Its job is to elevate the status or to, as we said, intensify the status of the adjective. We will be slightly late to the meeting. A little late, a bit late, slightly late. Modification adverb to indicate late. The bridesmaid dress is a very unflattering shade of puce. So unflattering here being the adjective and very being the adverb of modification that tries to elevate the adjective it's describing. So again, adjectives and adverbs. Now moving on to what we call adverbs of comparison. Let's see how that works. So they work in a very similar way to adjectives, okay, because adverbs can show degrees of comparison, although it's slightly less common to use them like this. So when it comes to flat adverbs, some flat adverbs, that means adverbs that look exactly like the adjective counterparts. When they are flat, the comparative and superlative forms look the same as the adjective, comparative and superlative forms. So in that case, because they're so similar, it's usually better to use stronger adverbs or stronger adjectives or stronger verbs other than just using, comparative and superlative adverbs. Don't always rely on them. Be, ready to vary. An absolute adverb describes something in its own right. That's what the job of an absolute adverb is. Okay, so he smiled warmly. He smiled, but how warmly did he smile? You can even say he smiled very warmly. Okay, and very would describe warmly. Okay, how warmly he smiled. A hastily written note. A note that was written in haste. So in haste would be the adjective and hastily would be the adverb. Okay, in the same case, warmly is the adverb and warm is the adjective. So you could say he gave a warm smile. Right, how is the comparative form of the adverb formed? When it ends in the suffix ly, just add the word more. It's hidden under there, but that's the word more. And to make the superlative form of the same, just add the word most. He smiled more warmly than the others. What does this mean? It means the others smiled. They might have been smiling, but not as warmly as he did. So he had a more genuine, friendly smile. The more hastily written note contained the clue. So hastily, but even more hastily than other notes. So that implies that all the notes that were written in a certain manner or speed, but this letter was written with more speed in mind than the others, so it was written at a faster speed. Now, he smiled most warmly of them all. That means superlative. The others smiled, but he was the number one best at smiling. Not just at smiling, at giving a friendly, warm smile. Friendly is an adjective, by the way, and an adverb. The most hastily written note on the desk was overlooked, and again, the superlative. That means there might have been other notes on the desk that were written in haste, but the one that got ignored was the one which was written the fastest. Let's have a look at a table now with lots of adverbs, comparative and superlative adverbs here. Let's have a look. Quietly becomes more quietly, which becomes most quietly. Slowly becomes more slowly, which becomes most slowly. Seriously becomes more seriously, which becomes most seriously. Okay, so that's how we can form the expressions we were talking about. Now let's go on to monosyllabic adverbs, okay? Adverbs with only perhaps one syllable that do not end in the suffix ly. In this case, its comparative and superlative forms will be identical to adjectives. In this case, add er if you want to form the comparative, and add est if you want to form the superlative. However, if the adverb ends in e, please take off the e before you add that word. So Jim works harder than his brother. Everyone in the race ran fast, but John ran the fastest of all. That means he was the number one. So he was the first. Yeah, he was the winner probably, anyway. Now, another table of adverbs suggests how to use this er and est ending for comparatives and superlatives respectively. Hard becomes harder, the hardest. Fast becomes faster, the fastest. Late becomes later, the latest. Now, always be aware that some adverbs will have what we call irregular forms in the comparative and superlative, such as the ones in these sentences. The little boy ran farther than his friends. We don't say the little boy ran more than his friends. It's not correct. We don't say the little boy ran more fast than his friends. No, it's because of its singular syllable. You're driving worse today than yesterday. Worse, comparative. He played the best of any player. The best, superlative. He was number one on the football pitch. And now comparative and superlative adverbs, a different batch of them. Badly, because it's irregular, becomes worse in its comparative and the worst in its superlative. Far becomes farther or further and becomes the farthest or the furthest. Little becomes less, which becomes the least. Well becomes better, which becomes the best. And let's have a look at a note that I'll leave you with today. This is a note, a message that was written on my school leaving diary by one of my favorite teachers in secondary school when I was 15 years old. And that teacher had written a message I will never forget. She wrote, "Good, better, best. May you never rest until your good is better and your better is best." So I think this message can be applied to many areas of our life, wouldn't you say? Share this message with a friend today if you care for it. And thank you very much for joining today. This was the end of my grammar presentation for today. Don't forget to visit my website at womslearnenglish.com to book your interactive online lesson with me. And here are some of the courses that we offer. From general English courses to business English courses, exam IELTS preparation, and for those who would like a tailor-made lesson, a one-to-one private lesson, which we also offer. Also check out my Facebook page to find more idioms and more podcasts for different levels, also to find grammar and vocabulary activities that you could do. So thank you very much for joining me, and thanks for watching. If you found this presentation useful, please subscribe and share it with your friends. Thank you and see you soon.